let's talk briefly about all the grief that I get recently about immigration. Let's get our definitions straight so that we can actually have this conversation properly. An immigrant is someone who moves to the United States, for example, we're going to use the U.S. for an example because I live in the States, who moves to the U.S. to become a part of America. And as a result, they have the same problems that Americans have, meaning that they see their money going to fund every crazy ass war all over the world, and fund a bunch of programs in other countries, bail out a bunch of billionaires, bail out a bunch of poorly run states, bail out bankers, inflate the currency to worthlessness, and they still have to live here. So they still have to deal with all of that, because going to the country from which they came is not an option, right? That door is closed permanently. They're not going back to that. Therefore, they have to fight for this country, right? They have to become Americans and fight for it and learn English, the business language of America. That's a fact, okay? So that's an immigrant. That's somebody who's immigrating to the U.S. What's a migrant? A migrant is not the same thing. A migrant is just here for the money. They still live in some other country. They're just here to make as much money as they can and send it back home. No different than an American who lives in Missouri who works in West Texas out in the oil fields, or in North Dakota or something like that. They just work there. They just work there, make money, and then they go back to their state, right? That's the difference. That's the way you have to look at that. So when I'm talking about all of the problems, for example, in the trucking industry, these are not people that are coming here to live and work and keep their money in the States, because if they were, they would be in the same boat that every American is. They'd be going, dude, hold on, these rates are ridiculous. There's no way to even maintain the vehicles anymore. Okay, that's when you start going below cost. There's people are just going to leave. That's why you're losing all your good drivers. That's why just yesterday in Texas you had that big pile up of trucks and a bunch of people unalived. Yeah, and that's just going to continue. That's going to get worse, by the way. And it'll continue until, some senators, spawn, one of their little bratty Harvard-educated douchebags, kids get smeared along the interstate. Then it'll be real, right? See, then it happened to the main cast in the story. Some senator or some bullshit like that. No different than Silence of the Lambs. Nobody was after Buffalo Bill until a senator's daughter came. Oh, now it's real. Now it's serious. Dude, fuck you. Right? That's the reality. So until some politicians, a spawn gets smeared along the interstate by some flip-flop wearing douchebag who doesn't speak fucking English and who got a CDL because they gave somebody $2,000 in California, until that happens, no, nothing probably will change. And even then, it won't change a whole bunch. It'll just be something like, see, for you, it's thoughts and prayers. It's not real to them. It's all thoughts and prayers. If it happens to you or your family, it has to happen to one of them. Not to overstate that, but I mean, that's the reality, okay? So when we talk about the difference between immigration and migration, big fucking difference. So you guys have really got to stop, making yourselves into fools in the fucking comment sections, typing a bunch of crazy shit with your thumbs, because, I know how many people watch the entire video based on the level of the comments. I can always tell. Because I know that they didn't listen to the whole thing because they missed the rest of it. They just start furiously typing a bunch of shit and they think they understood all of it. No, they didn't. I mean, look, I'm a little more complicated, than just, surfacey bullshit, that you usually get on socialist media. Not to be a dick about that, but that's the truth.